Welcome to Two Therapists Talking. The hope for this podcast is to talk about important issues related to couples and individuals who are struggling in their lives with many different issues. I'm David Thompson, a marriage and family therapist.
And I'm Sherie Christensen, marriage and family therapist. Please join us as we explore these issues together, and we hope you will learn and be enlightened along the way. Come find us at twotherapisttalking.com. If you like what you're hearing, please get on and rate us and subscribe to the podcast.
Welcome back to Two Therapists Talking. I'm David.
And I'm Sherie.
And we are finishing up our series on victimhood, and we started into what to do to come out of victimhood, and just kind of a review. We talked about being empathetic, accepting responsibility for the emotions, kind of the difference between unwilling and unable.
Or not ready and unable.
Or not ready, and why that subtle difference is an important one. And so we want to continue and give you a few more things that will help. And
we're going to jump in. The first one that we want to talk about is understanding and accepting that your safety doesn't lie in the attitudes, words, or behaviors of others. Your personal safety.
Your truest core self-safety.
Yep. Relationship safety is a little different.
Yep. It's very different.
Yeah. Yes. That's better to say. Very, very different, right? But it's different than your own personal safety.
Which is it's weird. Let me think how to put this here, because it's often what puts us into victimhood is something obviously that happens outside of our control. Right. We didn't see it coming. So in the case of like betrayal, this really turns everything upside down. And when you have spent years without a lot of differentiation between you and your partner, and kind of on purpose, right? Because you're supposed to be one.
Interconnected.
Yes. And it's not you give 50 and they give 50. Yes. It's you give 100, they give 100. And so you've been so wrapped up in the relationship that it's almost a weird concept that your truest safety, your truest well-being, your truest peace and happiness and rest wasn't dependent on them, even though they've been such an important part of your life for so many years.
Yes.
Or however long. And so it's a weird, coming back to, okay, even if I haven't thought about this for a very long time, I am someone separate from them.
Yes.
And turns out that I always was. Weird concept, right? Well, again, it's sad because you shouldn't really have to address that probably in just a healthy relationship where, I support your interests, you support mine, but we're so connected. And so it's really heartbreaking when you're almost forced to look at it this way.
Right.
But it's also empowering because it's true.
Yes, empowering and critical, right? And I think it can be, we can get really sad about that concept. Look at all these sad things that happen.
Right.
But also, it's important that we still have that somewhere inside of ourselves.
Yeah.
Right? Even as we are in these hopefully beautifully connecting, interdependent relationships, that there is still a sense of us.
Yeah.
And a separateness that we are.
Well put. Yeah, exactly. That we don't lose that.
Yes.
In the relationship.
Yes.
But again, if you don't know what's happening and you're naturally, let's say, trusting because you're doing your best, you're putting a lot of effort and energy into this, you kind of just don't really think about this very much.
Yeah. And it absolutely is going to be a rock your world kind of a space, right? Because if a good portion of your life is involved with a close relationship, right? You can't have that safety, the relationship safety, be rocked and not have it affect you, right? But the key piece is being able to come back to that space and being
Yes.
able to find that grounding, centered space inside of yourself that you can trust you and you will be there for you, and that safety is there.
And it's almost like a necessary reset. Because
Absolutely.
if the relationship is going to improve, which in most cases it does,
Uh-huh.
I mean, we're working towards reconciliation.
Yes.
We're not in the business of breaking families up.
Right,
We're
right.
really in the business of keeping them together with better habits and patterns. But if you are going to improve the relationship, you need a healthier sense often of yourself in that relationship.
Yes.
Because it often gets lost somewhere. And I
Right.
really think it kind of gets lost anyway, even if something big doesn't happen in the relationship. It's almost good for relationships after however long to sort of come back to what are my interests? What do I enjoy? How do you support me in this? What do we
Right.
do together? But what do we do separately?
Yes,
And,
yes, yes,
and
yes.
find ourselves that way. So
Yeah. And I think some couples are maybe better able to
Yeah.
do that than others, right?
Yeah.
And I think we're trending toward, I think younger couples, you're seeing that a little bit more where they're like, oh yeah, you do your thing, I do my thing, and then these are the things we do together. Right?
Yes.
So I think we're really moving in a positive direction. But I absolutely 100% agree. If you don't have that personal reset, your relationship can't reset because you haven't found your core emotional safety to be able to re-engage in a relationship that has been tricky, painful, betraying, all of that. You have to
Right.
have your own internal safety. So I just want to land on that one more time because I think that's critical. And that is only work that you can do.
Yeah.
Your partner can't do that part for you.
Right. Especially in the aftermath of
Absolutely.
a discovery or learning something.
Yeah. There's going to be a ton of stuff that they're going to be necessarily involved if a relationship safety is going to
Right.
reset and improve. But that piece, you have to find that yourself.
Which goes right into the next point of differentiating risks and threats to the relationship as separate from risks and threats to self. And it's kind of a weird concept because we don't think like this really very much. And it's sad honestly when we're forced to, and our heart goes out to those who struggle with this, which I think on some level is most of us at some point. But again, it's just the idea that if they act in certain ways, they're jeopardizing the safety, the stability, the trust
Yes,
of the relationship.
relationship.
Kind of this bucket concept or the circles,
Yes.
like Sherry's talked about. I've talked about buckets. You know, the most important thing is you.
Yep.
For you, the most important thing in your life, your relationship with your higher power. This is like this very special place that kind of almost on purpose, others can't get in there and do very much damage.
Yeah.
Because they would. And
Yeah.
so the damage they do is in this other space
Yeah.
where the relationship itself may even end.
Or they can try to get you to call into question, either intentionally or unintentionally, that is your own safety.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. Right.
And so this is kind of that little bit of a wake up call to say, nope, that they can try to make you think you can't trust yourself or you can't find safety for yourself or all of that, but
Right.
you absolutely can. And anything they're doing simply will affect the relationship
Right.
and having that differentiated space. I love that.
And
Love.
honestly, I really do think it's the greatest invitation for them to do their work is when you are okay, despite the relationship really struggling. So that bucket, and I just love buckets, cracked, broken, bone dry. I think of like a rusty bucket, and you've got to seal it, mend it, weld it, whatever it takes, so that it's watertight again, and then drop by drop start to add to it. But all that time in this process, your personal bucket can
Yes.
be okay.
Okay.
And you're doing well, and it's attractive to them because you have a lot to offer. If they want to be in this relationship, it's like,
Right.
you know, there's good there.
Yes. It's attractive if they want to move
Right.
and want to be with you and want to improve and come together.
Which I think is the case most of the time. And of course, if not, then that's...
Then
We've
great,
talked
you
about
got
that
your
in past
full bucket all by
episodes.
yourself anyway, and you
Yeah.
can go find other spaces to put those drops.
And probably other relationships. And so
Yes,
still
exactly.
your bucket is so important.
Yes, yes. So adding one piece to that bucket is, again, that bucket analogy is, again, like the case of domestic violence, the case of severe abuse. Those
Right.
kinds of things are spaces where, you know, you're not repairing that relationship bucket, right? You need to remove yourself from, because there is damage to that, you know, space. There's potential damage to your bucket if you remain in that space.
Yeah.
Right? So, okay, the next one is to begin to become aware and try to recognize what attitudes, thoughts, or behaviors contribute to the difficult relationship pattern you may be in with your partner and what needs improvement. Super scary to try to step into that space.
That's a kind of a weird space maybe, right? Because it's hard when you've learned some things to think, well, how did I contribute? This goes back, if you recall, to the Steps to Recovery handout or concept that we covered. Oh, goodness.
Like
over a year ago. This is
ago.
early episodes where here's what the person, let's say, struggling with addiction should be working on.
Yes.
And here's what the partner of that person should be working on.
So
And one of the
listen up.
items is any relationship patterns that contributed to it being challenging or hard or difficult. But hard to hear, hard to consider,
Right. Right.
but important.
And again, this is, I feel like, and I think when we discussed this originally for the betrayed partner, when we mentioned this, we talked about how this is next level stuff,
Yeah.
right? This is after there's other things in place because it requires some healing, some differentiating, some finding yourself again, some boundaries and emotional safety and all of that to then be able to say, okay, what pieces are mine, right? And the reason why this is critical and the reason why this is even a thing that we even talk about is because this part is about you. Like, this part is about what can I change, whether it's in this relationship or another one.
Right. It's empowering.
Yes. That moves me forward and gives me a better life, right? It's even in cases of domestic violence, there are some spaces like, oh, this is so tricky to say. There are some spaces where you didn't contribute to the violence, but there are some spaces of learning and growth for you. Does that make sense? And maybe that's a better way to say it. Like, where are the spaces that you can take and learn from? Okay, I did this. I didn't hold a good enough boundary in this situation, and it allowed my partner to treat me in a different way
Right.
than if I had had a different boundary. And maybe
Right.
I didn't have any clue that that was even an option. Maybe I didn't, there's always these spaces of we didn't know what we didn't know. And because if we did, we wouldn't be in this situation, right?
Right.
And so that's what this piece is about, is what can I do differently? What can I learn from this experience that now I know that I didn't know before, to shift and change my future moving forward?
Yeah.
And again, this is in absolutely no way victim blaming. It is in no way saying that if you have been the victim of domestic violence,
Right.
or severe emotional abuse or any of these things, it's not your fault.
Right.
But what we want to do is look at the pieces of, are there some pieces? Are there some spaces that I can go, oh, do you know what? Now I know something I didn't know before. And and I can choose differently in the future.
Right. And a common scenario, for example, is husbands who have a difficult time talking to their wives about certain things, and the wives aren't really aware of it because they're not communicating well. He's not communicating well, but there's become a pattern that's contributed to
Yes.
him feeling disconnected or him feeling far away. And again,
Right.
this is not an excuse for
No,
for bad behavior,
absolutely not.
but important as you're working towards reconciliation to say, oh, look what happens when we feel this or when
Yes.
this happens. You'll say this, I will retreat. So
Uh-huh.
we have these patterns that we play out, and we have a role in those patterns. So again, this isn't blaming. This isn't, because we're trying to come out of all of that, right?
Right.
This is an
We're not going to blame
empowering,
on either side here.
right? Right. It's just not helpful. So
And this is, I think, goes to our training space, right? Like you're talking to two marriage and family therapists, and our theoretical base is that of interconnectedness
Right.
and relationship, right? This is not a linear, well, they did this, and so that caused this. And so we see it as, if you will, kind of that eternity shape, right? And we'll even draw that sometimes on the board and look at, okay, this affects this, which affects
Right.
how you feel and respond, which affects how you feel and respond, right? We create these patterns.
Yep.
But guess what? If there's no linear, I start this or you started this, what that means is that you have some ability to help shift and change relationship.
Right.
Right.
And you don't even owe it to the relationship as much as it helps you to heal and recover
Yes.
and come back to what you can do, which is your power.
Yep. And
Which
your
is-
value system and how you want to continue to live in the future, right? Again, if there's a space that you can shift something so that whether it's in this relationship or another relationship, that you can show up in a 2.0 version of you or a higher, better self, like that is golden.
Right.
We don't want to have had these victim experiences in our life and then move on without, at least for me,
Right, right.
I'm like, I want to glean
You're-
every possible kernel from this experience, right? Otherwise, you're bound to repeat it.
Right.
You will absolutely repeat that.
Too
space.
heavy. Don't do that.
Yes, don't. I don't want to. I certainly don't want to do
Don't
that.
do
Right.
that.
I want to take every ounce that I can. So, again, lean into this space when you're ready. Of what parts can I do differently? How can I show up differently, either in this relationship or if it is a domestic violence situation? It's gonna be a different relationship, right? You're not going to try to lean into it in this space. You're going to lean into it in a different relationship. And you're going to show up differently so that these patterns are different in the
Right.
future.
Right. Which really leads into the final point, which I think is the most, probably my
they're all the
favorite. I
most
know
important.
loving is pretty important too, but I love this one. And this is just life stuff. So you
Right.
hear this in The Choice. You
Yep.
hear this in Man's Search for Meaning. You hear this in The Road Less Traveled. So
Yep.
here's the point. Focus on the purpose and meaning you're making from what's happened.
Yes.
And how it's helping you to grow into your highest and best self. So when we can use these events that happen often outside of our control, but we can use them to restructure our thoughts, emotions, and behaviors, we continue living beyond the devastation.
100%.
So the pain will transform, the suffering will cease when we find meaning and purpose in it. So,
Yes.
well, what does that mean? Because that sounds really nice. And there's even a sense of like, yeah, I do feel like that's what will do it. But
Right.
what does that mean?
Where do we start with that?
It's like, an easy way is sometimes I'll say, well, let's just say what's going to be different about you as a result of this whole thing. Try to not super specifics, but just kind of a bigger, and with some pondering, usually the answer is, okay, well, I think I can already see how I'm more understanding.
Yep.
I'm more loving. Oh, keep going.
Yep.
And they'll start to go through these things. And it feels different.
Yes.
And these really good things came from so much pain.
Yeah.
And so much hurt and heartache and sorrow. And yet it's like a phoenix. We rise from the ashes, right? It will be why we're loving, why we're understanding, why we're empathetic. Often, I know with my clients, it's what created a sense of worth and value outside of earning or performing or what they used to think. It's like, what makes me lovable really, really, really? Like, if I'm going to teach this to my kids, how would I do it? Well, these experiences gave them kind of that knowledge and insight and perspective to tell their kids, hey, some really hard stuff is going to happen. Yeah. Yet, through it all,
yes,
you're worth it. You're lovable. I'm right here. You have support. And that only comes because you've been through it. Like, there's no way to know that unless you've experienced some really hard stuff yourself.
Right. And that gives you the opportunity to meaning make with them about the hard things that they're going to go through.
No, just that right there. Just that right there. Think about that. What difference does it make when you're going through something devastating to have somebody who knows what they're talking about?
Yes.
Almost as a guide to comfort, to give support, to just be there with you. What difference did they make?
It's huge.
What if you're that person?
Yeah.
What difference do you make?
Yes.
And so all of a sudden now it's like, okay, this thing was really hard, but it's like I'm transcending it somehow. Well, yeah, that's kind of the point maybe, right?
Yes. And just make those moments of pain, right? They're going to happen anyway.
Right.
Like, everybody is going to go through hard things, painful things. So let's make them count.
Yeah.
Make them count for something. And finding that meaning is what makes them count. Mm-hmm. I love that. So there
I like
are
it.
some
I'm just thinking about that.
beautiful things that options, things that you can think about. Now, you can do this on your own, but it's also a great thing to run by your therapist and to take in and say, okay, I've been thinking about this. Check me on this. What do you think? Do you feel like maybe I'm in a victimhood space about this or not, right? It's always a little tricky when we try to go too far, right? Because we can go too far with this and take over accountability.
Yeah.
For our circumstances. And so that is a really great place to be talking to a therapist about, okay, where's the appropriate balanced level of accountability, because it can feel secure and more in control if I take accountability for all the things, right? Because then that means I can change all the things, right? So it's very important as you're working on this space of taking that accountability in your life that you're not taking over accountability. So that is a really great thing to run by a therapist or a support person. But see what you can find and how you can create this incredible life where you are no longer stuck but are free to move in and through and become because of the hard that's happened.
Yep. That absolutely, I think, is probably the greatest thing that will make a difference.
Yeah.
So I think it's a great place to end.
Yes. Thanks for joining us through this kind of tricky but really deep and amazing topic.
Our first run through, because we're probably going to cover it again, and it will be even better in some future. Don't worry, I don't mean next week or anything.
You
We're learning as
just
we go.
told them that this is going to be the end, David.
It is. But we repeat ourselves a lot. I mean,
It's
we're
true.
over a
Everything's
year
all
now.
connected, right? All of these beautiful concepts.
We're coming up on 2 years. And so, yeah.
But
there's
all
a lot
these
of overlap.
concepts are beautifully
Yep.
and interconnected, and
Yep.
and that's what makes us healthy, balanced humans. So,
Yes.
thanks for joining us.
Hope it was helpful. See you next time.
Thank you for listening to Two Therapists Talking. We look forward to sharing more conversations with you. Connect with us at twotherapisttalking.com or email podcast@twotherapisttalking.com. If you like what you're hearing, please get on and rate us and subscribe to the podcast.